What is fear and how can we learn to deal with it? Now, fear obviously is a very huge topic. There's all kinds of fear. There's fear of spiders, there's fear of dark places, there's just an existential fear, there's fear that we don't even know how to define. Sometimes we feel fearful for no reason whatsoever, apparently. So how do you deal with such a vast subject, and how can we develop strategies and techniques to overcome our fears? Now, it is obviously impossible to get into the details of all the different kinds of fear that people experience, right? I mean, but is there a more global way of looking at it? And then once we have that information, we can ourselves dissect our own issues and deal with it. Now, when you look at fear, it is an acronym, false evidence appearing as real. That means we are afraid of something that may or actually may not at all be what it seems to be. Now, mind you, there is a difference between a fear and a phobia. Phobias are defined as a fear of something that actually has no roots in reality. For example, let me give you an example. Let's say I enter into an elevator, and as the elevator goes down, I happen to have a blood sugar drop. And as my blood sugar drops, I suddenly break out in a cold sweat and I start to shake. And as it so happens, at that very moment, the elevator rattles. And unconsciously, I immediately associate the rattling and the uncertainty of the elevator with my physical symptoms and my psychological symptoms of the blood sugar drop. And I attribute this to the elevator. And what happens is a phobia has been born. In other words, actually there was nothing wrong with the elevator. I made it so. And so the next time I go in an elevator, and as I approach the elevator, I have what is called an anticipatory anxiety. I start to worry about the possibility of this happening again because I felt so terrified in the elevator. And I think it's the elevator that causes me these symptoms. But in reality, it was my blood sugar drop that caused this terrifying feeling in my body. And now I start to build. I have the anticipation of what could happen, and now I make it worse. I imprint that deeper in my mind, and I may even start to avoid elevators. And every time I see an elevator, I've worked with so many people, for example, that had the same phenomena happening when they were driving their car. They were driving the car, had a blood sugar drop, perhaps they hadn't eaten for a long time, there was lack of protein in the body, or they were having some sort of insulin irregularity, and they started to shake on the road and attributed that to the road or to driving and became terrified of driving. For years, having been driving only side roads because this happened on the freeway, and they attributed this to the terrifying freeway. It was never about the freeway, it wasn't even about the car, it wasn't even about driving. You see? So a phobia is different from a fear because a phobia is based on something that actually never happened. But a fear is different. A fear could be based on something that actually happened. Like I could be bit by a really terrifying spider and it hurt like heck. And so the next time I'll be avoiding places and situations where these spiders live. And so my fear is based on an experience that has its root in reality. Now, these fears could originate in so many different places. I could be exposed to all kinds of terrifying situations, abuse, hurt, insult, physical injury, mental injury, and so on. And so there is a reason the unconscious mind remembers those instances and has learned to avoid these situations. So my fear is based in reality. However, reality is different for everybody because we can start taking this to a whole new level. For example, let's take fears that people have of life itself. Now, when you are dealing with existential fear, often the cause is something very different than what we think it is. Because what happens is we are, and that's what the acronym is all about, fear appearing as false evidence. It is not at all real. What happens is we have belief systems. We have been conditioned to believe certain things. Our culture has taught us certain things. I have certain desires, and I'm holding on to these ideas. Let's say political ideas, religious ideas, racial ideas, my pet peeve ideas about what is the nature of reality, how I should be respected and how I should be treated, how my wife should treat me, how my husband should treat me, how the whole world has to look upon me, and so on. So I have certain ideas that have come upon me due to my conditioning, my parents, my environment, even my body, the way I look, the way I used to look, and I'm expected to be treated like I was when I was 20. And so all these ideas are in our head. And unconsciously, we are trying to uphold, we're trying to nurture these pet ideas that we have about reality and ourselves. But what happens in day-to-day life, it proves to be a very different situation. The life, the way it's happening to us, give us contrary input. People have ideas about politics that are so different from ours, unacceptable to us. People treat us differently as we get older. They don't look upon us like, oh, they look so nice, or you're so young and healthy and you're so able. And just because the body gets old, your mind doesn't get old, and you're thinking like, why are they treating me this way? There are certain racial issues that in certain countries you can freely move without anybody noticing you, whereas in another country you're going to be outcast. And that is across the board. I mean, I used to live in India. I was the only white guy there. As if discrimination doesn't happen there. Yes, it does. It's not just being dark or black here in this culture. It's also when you go to, cultures where you are different. So anytime you're different, you're going to be discriminated against. That is just the nature of reality. And it's hard for us to accept that. And so we have all these ideas in our minds. We have all these expectations. And the world around us does not agree all the time. And so we react. We try to uphold our truth, the way we think about ourselves. And we become unconsciously afraid of opposition. We become afraid of other ideas. We become afraid of being confronted with reality. I remember when I was living in India and I was the only white guy, and people look upon you as you're not one of us. It wasn't because that was a bad thing, but I sometimes, you become oversensitive. I had not enough protein. I didn't, have always the strongest of foods. And I became a little reactive. And I thought, why are they treating me differently? But the fault lied completely with me. I felt like I was not aware of the fact that I came here voluntarily. I came here not because I had to be here, because I wanted to be here, and I started to react. And I forgot the bigger reality of things. Now that is of course different than actual discrimination, that actually takes place in different countries. But I just give you an example of my wrong thinking that caused me to feel discriminated, because I was holding on to this false notion that I should be treated equally to all the people living in India at that time. But I was different. I came from a different country. I looked differently, and I came here voluntarily. And so I was not always aware enough that that's okay. That's okay to be different. It's okay to not fit. And, carry that with joy, with sense of humor, and with the sense of, lightness. And so it is us ourselves that cause us to react and be in fear. And the root cause is holding on to false notions about reality and ourselves. Now, when you look at this from a yogic perspective, anything that is not my true self is a layer of conditioning wrapped around the self. And the moment I'm holding on unconsciously to any of these layers, I am going to have to defend, because I have identified myself with these layers. Let's say I'm having a layer of a strong identity of being Dutch. Now, then when I am going to India, where everybody is Indian, and I am unconsciously holding on to my Dutch ways of reasoning, my Dutch sense of democracy, my Dutch sense of equality, and then I'm confronted in India with a culture that is completely different, where all these pet ideas that I've been holding on to as true prove to be very different. Who says that my ideas, the way the Dutch people think, is the norm of the universe? India is an ancient culture, thousands of years old. They have their own ideas. Now, I'm not saying they're good or bad, they are different. And so because I'm holding on unconsciously to my conditioning, to one of the layers wrapped around my true self, I get now confronted all the time with a different reality happening outside of myself, and I'm reacting, and I become afraid that these people then, or that culture, will invade my comfort zone. And this continuously defending, this upholding, if I would have been able to pull away my Dutch conditioning, not my Dutch virtues, my Dutch conditioning, would I not be much more free? And you see, a lot of our fears politically, religiously, our religious fears, our political fears, our societal fears, our relationship fears are based in this holding on to unconscious layers of conditioning that are wrapped around the self. And so in an ideal situation, we learn to let go of these layers of conditioning. We learn to clear all of this away with the notion that I am actually none of that. I am the self with the capital S. I'm a divine being, as is everybody else. And all the differences are just the different garments that we wear. And so what if I could look at you, and see your differences as just a different form of fashion? You look different. Your skin is different. Your race is different. Your religion is different. Your political ideas are different. So let's say you are an extravagant, exuberantly enthusiastic fashion enthusiast, and I can appreciate all your different colors from a creative, joyful perspective. Realizing that I myself am pretty weird. The way I look, the way I dress, the way I talk, my accent, I'm very different than you are. I am my own crazy fashion statement, as are you. Instead of seeing all the differences as threats to me, like I want you to conform to me so that then I feel comfortable and safe, instead I start looking at all these differences as beautiful expressions of the divine playing with itself in a myriad of ways. And so we start to lose the fear. And overcoming fear means starting to have a different understanding about who we really are as souls. We are one. All of us are one. Behind all these layers of clothing, behind all these differences, we are one infinite consciousness. The more I'm able to retreat to that center point within myself, the more I'm capable of, one, letting go of all my conditioning, and two, seeing you as the same source as myself. And this is a beautiful way of learning to overcome the fear. Now, this is, of course, is different from a fear of spiders. When you're having a fear of spiders, I think it's good to be careful when it comes to spiders and snakes. And some of these are just learnings. These are not fears that are impeding you from living your life. A fear can also be a warning. Like, yeah, I mean, you go there, you're going to get stung, so don't make a big deal about it. This fear is just an apprehension. But if it becomes paralyzing, then yes, we need to treat that. How do you treat it? By desensitizing you to these kinds of fears. So we do that in a therapeutic setting where we teach you mentally, when these things come to us, to react and respond in better ways. Because there's always two elements to any situation, right? There is, in this case, the spider, and then there is the emotion that I have attached to a spider based on my experience. This emotion could be neutral, it could be positive, it could be terrifying. So it's not the spider that's the problem, it's my emotion that I have attached to it that's the problem. So in therapy, what we can do is we can then desensitize or reinterpret, reframe your emotional response. And we do that in a safe environment, in a therapist's office. We teach you to approach the spider in your mind. We instill in your unconscious mind new emotions, new ideas, new concepts about the spider, so that next time when you get near the spider, you have ammunition, you have experience other than terrifying, based on your therapeutic exposure, to deal with the spider. So you see, there's different kinds of fears. Some fears are not at all bad. And then there is fears born out of ignorance. And ignorance means our conditioning. The more I am conditioned, the more reactive I will be, the more I'm hanging on to my pet ideas, to my wrong sense of self. And that is how we can summarize this talk today. The wrong sense of self is thinking that I am Pieter, I'm Dutch, I'm a man, I'm white, and so on and so forth. This is all wrong. It is a relative truth. The real truth is that I am the self, as are you. You and I, in that regard, we are one and the same. My differences are just garments, dresses, of the unconditioned, of the conditioned type, which is the clothing that I'm wearing. It is the appearance of this body. Because from the yogic perspective, every time we get born in different situations. Every time I wear a different dress. Next time I may be a woman. Next time I may be gay. Next time I may be Muslim. Next time I may be whatever, right? I may be even living on a different planet altogether. I may not even be a human being. And perhaps, with a little bit of luck, I may not even be born as a human being at all. I may just be an infinite spirit in reality, or a drop merging in the ocean of infinity. There is no human being to begin with. And so you see, you can crank this up as high as you want to be. And the more we are close to that reality, the more fearless we become. We don't have to defend, we don't have to uphold. I'm totally okay with your differences. I'm totally okay with my own differences. You don't form a threat to me. I'm good all by myself because I understand that you are beautiful in your journey as I am an ongoing developing project. And so I hope this sheds some light, perhaps a different perspective on how we can deal with fear. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll be in touch.